Okay, 4-question warm-up. Today is Wednesday, January 23rd. Is that right? Second. 4 questions, all utilizing distributive property with algebra. So the first two, what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve it. I'm going to solve the first two one each way. The first way that most people probably did was that it divided both sides by 2. Now remember, what this says right here, it says two groups of x minus 1. So when you are multiplying a polynomial, in this case x minus 1 by 2, you are essentially saying you have 2 of those groups, or 3 of those groups, or 5 of those groups. So in this case, you say you have 2 groups of x minus 1. So if I divide that by 2, instead of having 2 groups of x minus 1, I will end up having just 1 group of x minus 1. And that's the reason why dividing by whatever the multiple is works. So instead of having 2 groups, you have 1 group. And if you divided that side by 2, you divide the other, and you end up with x minus 1 equals 3. Add 1 to both sides, and x will equal 4. In the second question, when you are solving this one, instead of dividing, you could also do it the other way, which is called expanding using distributive property. So you have negative 2 groups of x minus 4. So you have negative 2 times x, which is negative 2x. And you have negative 2 times negative 4, which is a positive 8. So when you expand, this is called expanding using distributive property. You end up with this 2-step equation. You would subtract 8 from both sides. Negative 2x equals negative 20. Divide both sides by negative 2. And x will equal positive 10. So far, so good. So those are 2 different methods you could use. You could either divide both sides, like we did in the first one, by whatever the multiple is, or you can expand using distributive property. Okay. Now for the next 2 questions, I'm going to do the first one this way. So I'm going to divide both sides by what number? 2.5. And by dividing both sides by 2.5 using this method, I will end up getting x minus 3.4 equals how many? If you have $15 divided into piles of $2.50, you can make 6 piles exactly. Mental math and play without using a calculator. You add 3.4 to both sides, and x will equal 9.4. Final answer. And in the last question, instead of dividing, I could divide both sides by 3/4. I could actually do this. This works. Right? I could do it that way, but because I want to show you both ways, I'm going to go back, and rather than do that, I'm going to do it the more complicated way, and I'm going to expand using distributive property. So 3/4 times x. Oh, isn't that nice? DJ Snake, let me love you. How do I get rid of that? There, DJ Snake is gone. So by expanding it, 3/4 multiplied by x is actually going to be 3x over 4, right? Because we multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. 3x over 4 minus 3/8 equals 2 1/4. So by expanding using distributive property, right, 3/4 times a half is that 3/8 minus 3/8. At this stage, what did you learn you could do before when you have fractions in an equation? You could multiply both sides by what? A common multiple of the denominators. So you have a choice. You can add 3/8 to both sides, which is fine, or you can multiply both sides by what number? 8. So if I multiply both sides by 8 here, which is totally fine, make this side 8 times bigger and this side 8 times bigger. This will become 8 over 1 multiplied by 3x over 4, which once I cross reduce will be 2 over 1. And then 2 times 3x, when I multiply the numerators, will leave me with 6x. So 3/4 of x multiplied by 8 would be 6 full x's. And 8 multiplied by negative 3/8 would be negative 3. And 2 1/4, which is really 9/4 multiplied by 8, is going to be 18. So instead of manipulating fractions, understanding that multiplying both sides by a common multiple of the denominators will give you an equation that doesn't have any fractions. We'll leave you with this question here. X equals 21/6. or 3, which is 18, and 3/6 or 3